Hello, my name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Thank you for joining me for this IPA podcast, and always a pleasure a couple of times a year to get on the phone here, talk about the state of education here in Illinois, and just hear a few thoughts that are on his mind about what's currently happening with the status of education in our state. Our State Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Tony Smith. Tony, as always, it's a pleasure to hop here on the phone and catch up and hear what's going on.
Well, Jason, it's really a pleasure. Appreciate all the support and the opportunity.
So, Tony, obviously we're starting here with the beginning of the school year. Just appreciate you coming in and working with us for your back to school video, but thought I'd open it up for you right out of the gate to share any opening thoughts, remarks here as we get started. I know we are full force ahead in my household as I'm dropping my daughter off at 7 a.m. for band and picking her up at 5 o'clock for cross country and everything else in between with all of our kids. So we are well underway in the Leahy household for sure. I'm sure the same for you. So just any opening thoughts here as we get started this school year.
Well, just how many opportunities we have for our kids in Illinois. I mean, it's been an amazing effort. All the work we've done to create more funding and more equitable funding. It's much more than just academics, right? It's the whole child, whole school, whole community approach, and I think we are making progress. I would say, though, that we've got to continue to advocate. We are far away from where we need to be. We have a district in Illinois that's only at 47% of capacity to offer what now in the law is an adequate education. So we got a lot of work to do, but there are so many things to celebrate, and I've been impressed with just at the beginning of the school year, great stories already coming out, really thoughtful work around personalization, outreach. It seems to me that more and more people are making sense of, that social emotional learning isn't just something that happens to, get classroom activity started. It's something that's much bigger and kind of a school-wide activity.
Yeah.
So pretty excited about the start of the school year.
So you've got a unique thing that you're doing here today, Tony. And just for a point of reference for folks, the recording is happening here on August 27th. But you're en route to Elgin right now as we celebrate Perkins being reauthorized, which, getting anything through in Washington these days seems to be a Herculean effort. So that's wonderful. But you're going to go there to help showcase some of the good work going on in the Elgin School District.
Yeah, so U46 is the site for the event today. Really good and thoughtful work. The community has rallied around the idea that, career and tech ed isn't just something you put off to the side. It's something you embed in the whole system. And Representative Raja Krishnamurthy, who is the Illinois rep, which is great, but however, he is really the key architect with a representative from Pennsylvania, Glenn Thompson, that they crafted and got Perkins reauthorized, and they got it through unanimously in the House and then moved it in the Senate. So, this is a great opportunity to celebrate, Illinois' leadership. And with our Post-Secondary Workforce Readiness Act, we're really moving and taking a lead among states, creating opportunities for kids. The idea of moving to competency, as you and I have discussed many times, competency-based graduation in high school, moving to transitional math, looking at the pathway structure and having that adopted, and now moving to pathway designations on the high school diploma starting in 2020. So pretty exciting stuff, and a chance to spend some time, celebrate, but also talk about the work ahead today.
Tony, as I'm sitting here reflecting on my career in tech ed experience when I was in school, it's not just for those that maybe are exploring a pathway to a career, which we would hope students would consider that. But, I just think about doing basic wiring and plumbing around my house. I found those classes to be pretty helpful for some of that, So I think all kids could benefit from some of the exposure that those courses provide, if you know what I mean.
Oh, entirely. And the chance just to explore, try some stuff out, and it's not always just about finding the exact right job. It's about experiences, and sometimes the important thing is about learning what you don't like.
Yeah.
It's really the well-rounded education that all of us want for our kids, and I think many of us benefited from. So creating those opportunities and moving to a much broader sense of assessment also, like, what do kids know and how are they demonstrating what they know?
Right. Absolutely. Well, Tony, you referenced the competency-based program and the pilot work that's currently been going on across the states. We've obviously talked about this quite a bit, something that we're pretty excited about here at IPA as we think about the opportunities. I think about it for my own kids and exciting that is. And I think we're looking at how we model that even with professional development here at IPA with micro-credentialing and things. But just curious about your perspective on where we are right now in working the competency-based movement through the states, what you foresee moving forward for this, because I know we're trying to kind of go slow to go fast, but it feels like we're starting to pick up some momentum and some steam here with this.
Yeah, the leadership of the districts that jumped in at the beginning, and really the willingness, honestly, from staff, from school boards, superintendents, administrators, folks who jumped in the pilot early have really, I think, created room for conversations around the state. And people, you don't have to be in the pilot to do a lot of the work that's already described in legislation. So, the pilot is really about a professional community of practice, folks learning from each other. We've been really fortunate to get people from around the country and some of the Northeast states that have kind of led the way on this to come in and do PD. But we've got a bunch of districts now that are imagining and starting to work with and set policy in their own districts around, different ways to measure and support high school graduation by demonstration of mastery rather than just seat time. And it's pretty transformative, and I think this is the kind of thing that will really cause systems to rethink. Are you designed around what young people need in order to support their learning, or are you designed around other things like adult time? So this is a pretty critical moment.
Schools are finally feeling like they're getting to the point that they're ready to explore this. What can they be doing? What kinds of resources does the agency have available for them related to competency-based ed?
So the resources on the State Board website, Mary Reynolds has been amazing at pulling resources together, and the College and Career Readiness site. We also have been really fortunate to have student leadership. So the Student Advisory Council has also put together resources, kind of questions and directions for young people. So the state website is definitely a resource in this, but I will say districts that are in the pilot, there are superintendents, there are teachers, school board members that have really taken this on as kind of their key issue. And so we have leadership now around the state of practitioners who are picking this up and giving good examples.
That's great. Well, and I've had an opportunity to do an IPA talk with Mary, and that was extremely informative, and it's been one of our better viewed IPA talks in general. So I think that just speaks to the interest here that lies in with the competency-based education approach. And I expect we'll see more of that across the state as time goes by. So, Tony, I want to pivot here a little bit. Recently, ISB released the Kindergarten Readiness Report, regarding the kids' assessment that took place in schools this past year. Obviously, we've got some real work to do there based on at least the way that the report read of helping kids be ready for school. Just curious about your thoughts with that in general.
Well, I think it's a pretty amazing opportunity to look at the resources that are in our communities and where we are creating opportunities for kids to get what they need. I think the biggest issue for me is this is a set of data looking at where we have really created conditions for kids to thrive and where there are places where we have not yet done what we need. And, I think the biggest issue, this as a principal, there's so many things that happen before a young person, before a kid comes and to the school in the first place. And so looking at that and having more language and the opportunity to discuss, what kind of supports the kids need before they get to us. So that quality data set is really the first time we've had anything like that. And, I think it's not about how individual kids are or are not doing, but really what kind of support have we created in our communities to help kids be ready. And I mean, the performance gaps we see are really connected to many of the opportunity gaps before kids even get to us, right? So I think the kids data for the first time gives us a way to talk about this, just like with the new funding formula. Before we had a kind of a general sense of the inequity. Now we can look a lot more deeply at the conditions that a school or a district sits in a community, and also simultaneously now look at the conditions young children and families are sitting in before they even get to school. So I think we're increasing the database to change the conversation about where our families are situated in Illinois and what kind of resources. If we have high expectations for every child, then we should also be discussing how well are we supporting those kids and families before they even get to our K-12.
No doubt.
So it's a pretty powerful data set.
Well, it really creates for a talking point, right? More than just a talking point per se, but that information can be pretty powerful when having that dialogue both locally and with policymakers, I would say.
That's exactly right, Jason. I think the amazing thing, right, is so at the classroom level, information now on different dimensions for educators in schools about, on really important dimensions that are not just about academic performance, but are about, the well-being and the readiness of our, youngest learners. And so that ability to share that information and talk about, the observation, the whole child, before we're talking just about, getting on grade level for reading, but just how is this young person doing? That's in the classroom, in schools. That's a pretty important shift. And then at the macro level, state level, the policy and advocacy that you're talking about, we can testify and share with members in the General Assembly about the lack of access to quality preschool, which that's going to have a big impact on how we talk about resource distribution. So I think really at the micro, classroom, individual, kid level, it's amazing, and also as a data set for the state.
Well, and I'll just say as we in this brief conversation on kids, Tony, as an editorial comment, I appreciate your work, and this was one of the first things that you got hit with as state superintendent of helping, I believe, make that assessment a little bit more doable and tenable for folks, much more reasonable as you look at us now really focusing in on some key data points to be collected by these kindergarten teachers. Where before there were many more data points, and now I think we're in a much more manageable position with that, and I know I'm personally grateful for that as well as others. And not to turn too fast from kids, but we got one last thing I want to make sure we cover, because I'd be remiss for that, and it's just a small minor topic. That would be ESSA. Not that we couldn't spend probably several hours discussing this issue, but obviously we are now into full implementation of ESSA. We're past a lot of the planning and the preparation of implementation. We're now into it. Obviously, we'd like to hear your perspective, kind of on how we're doing at the onset of that, and what school districts need to be thinking. I know as we look at the year ahead, there's going to be looking at IBAM and self-assessments for districts as they look at their own internal processes, accessing support through Illinois Empower, preparing for state assessments this year. A lot there to kind of to go over, and I know we can't spend all day on it, but just curious about your thoughts.
Okay.
I know you need a breath and need a deep breath. I got it.
The topic is big, but the work in the state has been really remarkable, and I think important to go backwards a little bit. So December 10th of 2015, Every Student Succeeds Act was signed into law, right? So we're coming right up on 3 years, and I just think it's important to talk about progress over that time and the leadership in this state in particular, about engaging and the number of conversations, iterations, building on strengths that this state and this community has. The Balanced Accountability Measure Committee, right out of the gate in, January of 2016, we started a conversation and said, hey, we've got state legislation that talks about a balanced accountability approach. Shouldn't we really be tying these things together? And so I think the weaving and the interconnections and then deeply committed work of getting around the state and talking to people. I mean, the hundreds of meetings, thousands of participants, the multiple drafts, and then all the way to the accountability system that now looks more broadly at, there is definitely this idea of proficiency, which we want our kids to be proficient or better, right? I mean, all of us as parents want our kids to know and understand the grade level content. But we also recognize that growth really, really, really matters. And so our accountability system, fully half of that academic performance is growth. And I mean, that's the thing that we cherish as educators, watching kids learn more, know more, demonstrate more. So that's pretty powerful. The social emotional learning dimensions, the broader school community, looking at chronic absence, things that, getting kids and connected to school, questions of belongingness, inclusion, the kids who are saying that this is the place I want to be, when they come, they do better. And so, I think our conversation about the role of school and districts and that accountability needs to be grounded in support and practice sharing. The thing we say we want our kids to do is really be great learners, and as they struggle with a little disequilibrium, connect with peers and, that classroom culture. So we're trying to build, Illinois Empower from the sense of deep education and shared practice. And, not all of us are great at everything, and some of us do better at other things. We can learn from each other. And I think that's where we're positioned. So, coming on 3 years of a federal law being enacted, I think Illinois has done not only incredible work at the policy level, but practically, the number of people that have been engaged, the tools we built, the IBAM rubric is, I think, one of the most important and transformative school district community tools that I've seen in the country. I think the ability for us to talk about some very clear, common things across districts and, look for personalization, look for governance, look for content, and you have a common principle, PLE, that you can look at different kinds of practices all around the state. This rubric is really powerful, and not just for districts and schools that aren't doing great, but really in this continuous improvement way, it's a really brilliant tool. So I'm pretty fired up about where we are in the process.
You bet. Well, and obviously, you talk about student growth, Tony. A big component of our system is looking at the assessments, and I know for principals this will be pretty important moving forward. And there are some changes. Some things are remaining somewhat similar, which I think we're excited about, with SAT being the selected high school assessment moving forward. But there are some changes, so to speak, with regards to the K-8 assessment. Do you mind sharing out a little bit about that and what people can expect here in the year ahead?
Well, definitely. I think the strengthening of the high school assessments, now with 9th graders, 10th graders, and 11th graders, the state board supporting assessment at all levels, using the SAT, and being able to track that growth over time, but also obviously the importance of having a high quality college entrance exam paid for during the school day is a significant commitment to equity in the sense of access for everyone and support with the College Board, Khan Academy. I mean, all of the free resources support students' growth in high school around a really important. I think it's a tool for them to open up opportunities, and now to have that supported in high school is really powerful. The elementary assessment, the thing that I do want to highlight here, Every Student Succeeds Act was a reauthorization it's important to note that the expectation is for universal assessment, that we are supposed to and required to federally assess all of our students on a similar assessment, on the same assessment. So it's not something that Illinois is doing to kids in districts. There's an equity commitment to know how kids are doing on the same assessment at the same point in time. And that's actually universal, 100%. The minimum threshold of that to receive funding, continue to receive funding, is 95%. So, just to clarify that, but we are building from the assessment of readiness, the park work we've been doing. We're going to continue using that, and we've heard loud and clear from the field that there are some districts that want to add local assessment items, that there are districts that are really talking about adaptive, like as a young person moves, that we'd like a test that kind of meets them where they are and keeps pushing them. Yeah. So we have sought that in additional procurement, but given just how important it is for consistency and stability, as you were saying, the anchor set or the core items are park, and we will use that and build from that over the next 3 to 5 years. And I think we're actually in another good spot. We have thoughtful people in Illinois who've been assessment leaders and contribute not only to the item bank but also to the standard setting for park, and now have been leaders nationally on this work. So I think evolving in the sense of getting good feedback and continuing to grow our quality assessment, but really keeping the core and the stability and the comparability possible. That's where we are.
Don't you think, Tony, as I'm reflecting here, as you're talking about school districts tailoring this assessment to meet their needs and the needs of their district, as districts explore competency-based education, the personalization of learning opportunities, I could see where there's a possibility they could really leverage, the customization of the state assessment and what they're trying to do with that. Don't you think?
Oh, I certainly do. And, Jason, you and I have had many conversations both on these interviews, but in person. I am a massive believer in move on when you're ready. I just don't think, the idea of keeping kids in a class when they're ready to do other things makes a ton of sense. And I think having those common competencies and performance criteria make it so we can look at each other and say, yeah, this young person has demonstrated competency in this and they're ready. And to really begin to support, common expectations. So we have a way of talking about what's fair, but also kind of unleashing all kinds of potential. This idea of democratizing assessment, that we have a common floor, make sure that we all agree we can support everybody in our community to know core things that are valuable to us. And then, kids can do and demonstrate amazing things that, if we give them some room, they are pretty extraordinary. So, I think we're figuring that out, and the assessment's a big piece of it.
So just to kind of tie this whole conversation together, Tony, as I reflect on ESSA, I reflect on funding, we're really entering into this unique period in our state in particular, I believe, where we're really now fully in this boat together. When you look at school-based accountability and what's happening, if schools are well under-resourced, I think it gives them and they're having difficulty getting their students where they want them to be. They say, listen, we need some help with our adequacy target here, right? I think educators can now look at this and say, we're not fully on the hook here all by ourselves. We need decision makers and policymakers to step into the fray with us here and make sure we have the things that we need. Now, once they're resourced and things maybe still aren't going, that's a whole other kind of conversation that people have to be prepared to have. But it's a really unique and exciting time moving forward.
Well, Jason, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the thing I've seen in the last couple of years that really did end up moving the policy was across the political spectrum, people said, hey, what's happening here isn't fair. If you're in a high need place and you're getting less funding than you need, we got to figure that out. And it became really a question of fairness. And if we have this big vision for Illinois, and economic future and social well-being, we better pay attention to, the distribution of resources. And so that ability just to talk a little bit different, I think is actually having an impact also in our accountability system across the board. How we talk about kids, how we talk about our communities. Let's understand where they're situated and not, demean anybody, but talk about the support they need. Because, if each one of our communities is doing better, we're all going to do better. I do really fundamentally believe that equity is a superior growth strategy for Illinois. And, I think all these pieces in policy are adding up to a good condition, to really work on some deep historical problems. But, we're definitely only going to get there together.
You bet. Well, Dr. Tony Smith, State Superintendent of Schools here in Illinois. As always, appreciate your time, Tony. Thanks for that.
Well, I appreciate you, Jason. Appreciate your leadership and really just the Educational Leader Network, the platform, micro-credential, all of that energy, and really supporting principals in schools. Principals are creating culture, climate conditions for, adults, kids, families. Yeah. Really, really a special role. So thank you for all your work.
Well, we're grateful for that and grateful, too. You're going to join us for our conference here in several weeks in October here in Springfield. That's always good for people to be able to connect with you personally. So thanks for that as well. Again, my name's Jason Leahy, Executive Director here at the Illinois Principals Association. With me, Dr. Tony Smith, State Superintendent of Schools. If there's anything the IPA can do for you, don't hesitate to give us a call, and you can always check us out on the web at ilprincipals.org. Take care.